Hi friends, welcome once again. So we bring in the curtains down using the risk culture and the risk appetite. And we just look at just a list, not a detailed discussion of the risk assurance practices. I'm saying just a list or a look at because in course of the whole session, we have actually addressed some of the risk assurance techniques or some of the risk assurance practices. So examples like fraud risk detection methods and prevention methods are all risk assurance techniques. We've looked at recording risks in the risk register where we log, we recognize the risk, we monitor, we control. These are all examples of risk assurance techniques. Okay, even audit that we've looked at, whether internal audit or external audit engagement, are all examples of risk assurance practices or risk assurance techniques. Our internal control systems, which we institute at the workplace, are also risk assurance techniques. In the past, you might have studied from your previous modules where you've looked at probability analysis, scenario analysis, sensitivity analysis, Monte Carlo simulation. You've looked at it. I'm sure you've remembered this. The capital asset pricing model, where we look at pricing and look at the concise definition of risk and the trade-off between risk and returns, are all examples of risk assurance techniques. Look at the business environment evaluation analysis. These are all examples. Okay, the pestle analysis, the SWOT analysis. These are all examples of risk assurance techniques. We will not go deep into those areas. That's why I'm just highlighting those. It's a whole package on its own in terms of going deep in looking at all of these items and how it relates to risk management or enterprise risk management as a whole. So basically, this session will center more on the risk appetite and then the risk culture. And again, we would look at just a summary highlight of these. Okay. So let's keep this in mind whilst we take the slides quickly on all of these. So welcome once again to Enterprise Risk Management. And I will always say that if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to revert. Get in touch with me or with my colleague David. All right. So as usual, um, the first slide is always important so that you can get our contacts and get in touch when you need help. So at the end of the day, like I said, we want to understand the meaning of a risk culture, identify the main three drivers of a risk conscious culture, the main threat to an efficient and effective risk conscious culture, and then the behaviors that will promote good corporate risk cultures. Okay. Then we look at the risk appetite. I will not go deep into the item number 4 because we have dealt with that already in the previous studies where we looked at the generic risk treatment or management principles, the thorough model. You remember where we say we avoid the risk, we accept the risk, we reduce it. Okay. Sometimes we say we want to pool the risk. We use the word pooling the risk together where we share the risk. Okay. And we also look at where we diversify. We diversify. Okay. So remember this Tara model. And like I said, we'll not go deep into this because we've dealt with it in the earlier slides or in the earlier lectures. We also look at why risk appetites tend to fail in most organizations. The reason principally is because risk definition of risk appetite has been vague, okay, quite vague in the past. We'll also examine the measures that could be implemented to improve risk appetites in business and organizations. And like I just started prior to showing you this slide, the various number of risk assurance techniques, models, and tools which you can adopt in business management practices. Okay. So culture is a way of life. Okay. So when we talk of a risk culture, it's simply where the organization has made risk management a way of life of the organization. So every employee is aware that here risk management is key. So everybody is aware, even the security person at the gate, those who are not even in mainstream work, the cleaners, everyone. Okay, everyone, the porter, anyone who comes, who works in the organization knows that here risk management is a way of life. So we take responsible action and we consider risk. It is the default mode at the workplace. So in this particular instance, risk culture becomes an important part of the solution to general issues which faces the organization. Everyone brings his or her hand on the desk and we ensure we fix the system. Okay. So a risk culture is one in which the evaluation of potential threats is self-evident and an important part of the decision making. So when you walk into the workplace, nobody tells you that these guys are risk conscious. Everybody knows. Okay. So you sit on this desk and they'll tell you, please, can you move slightly away because you are blocking the entrance. And in case there is any fire outbreak, you will impede access. So everything is quite in the default auto mode. Okay. So employees are always encouraged, report anything you see, whether to your colleagues, whether upward, share best practices. So they learn, they share everything to everyone. Okay. So three main ingredients in a well-functioning risk culture: heightened awareness to detect risks on an ongoing basis. It should be on daily basis, and everybody should look at it from a wider perspective, not just within your area. So if I'm in accounting, I don't just look at the risk that affect the accounting department, but how it even permeates beyond my accounting boundaries. Okay, goes into marketing, into security, into IT, everyone. So it is more of a bigger picture than that small corner which you find yourself. Okay, here when we are aware on an ongoing basis of the risks that go on, we tend to understand that the world is not static. The business environment is not static. It changes. Okay, it revolves. So things could move in a different direction than what we've anticipated. Therefore, we always want to be aware if there's any change. How do I respond to this change? It can be quite informal compared to the formal risk mapping exercise. You remember the risk mapping exercise where we look at the impact against the probability, which would tell us whether it is significant or medium or low risk. This is not what we are talking about. This is informal. Okay. So here, once you call upon somebody, the person easily comes up and speaks. He doesn't mind because there's no clear cut formality to follow. So they are always good at uncovering any risk exposures and they can easily tell you the potential harm. So you call the cleaner and the cleaner will tell you something that the CEO cannot even tell you. That's how it works, okay, when we heighten awareness to detect risk on an ongoing basis. Again, the second ingredient is communication, willingness to share, clear-cut reporting, okay. There should be open lines of communication. It shouldn't be just the established norm that write, email, text, call. No. It should also have some informal dimensions. But most importantly, we are looking at the climate in which these issues are addressed. Does the climate promote the need for me to come back and speak without fear that I will be discriminated upon? That can I come out and tell you that, listen, there's something wrong here without thinking that what I'm going to say is actually not what it is? Fear of making a mistake. No, we speak it as it is. And then if there are some remedial actions, we take it. Okay. And also without the idea that I'll be favored by senior management when they realize that I've said something which is right. No, without fear of favor. Open line of communications, regardless of whether it is formal or informal, but most importantly, the climate promoting it. Also, the willingness to incorporate risk management into decision making. Okay, here one key thing is looked at: proactiveness. So any decision making should look at preventing risk, not correcting the risk. Okay, now it has come up to, I mean, most business organizations will attest to the fact that reactive measures, corrective measures are quite expensive. Sometimes when the damage is done, it will take you years to recover. You know, when you leave the system to be loose and then somebody ends up stealing billions of pounds, you will lose it. Okay, you will lose it. And you can sack this person, you can jail this person, but you will not be able to raise that billions of pounds in just a period. Not It will take you years to recover. Okay. So always here decision making should look at preventive, not the reactive. Okay. That's all I want to say here in terms of willingness to incorporate risk making in risk management into decision making. Okay, so when with the risk culture, People will always have to rise above inclination to turn a blind eye to the problem at hand, and they will assume responsibility once we more or less make it a preventive measure. Okay, doing the right thing despite personal incentives to the contrary would then become the human nature of the within the organization. Okay, though it becomes an aspect of culture, but it becomes part and parcel of me when we institute strict, good, and robust risk culture within the organization. All right, forget about the cost. Okay, sometimes we think about the cost, but would the benefit help us? Sometimes within the short term, we don't realize it, but over time, we realize it. So from here, we jump onto the threats that impede this risk conscious culture. Now, there are several threats that we can think of, but we'll be limiting ourselves to three. Okay, three. So the first one is general optimism. You know, human beings by nature, we are predisposed towards being optimistic. You have the confidence that I'll pass this course. You have the confidence that I'll do this and it will be right. We have the can-do spirit. Okay, we don't want to be seen as we are weak and quite as if we know nothing. Okay, we don't want that negativity to be tagged against us. Now, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. So this actually prevents people from coming up to come and tell us that there's something wrong with the system. Because if everybody is being positive and you come out all of a sudden to highlight negative elements of the organization, you'll be seen as a troublemaker. Everybody is saying good things, and you come up and say, "Listen, this is not good. This is bad. Let's try and fix it." They'll think you are a troublemaker. You are the one distracting the firm from real issues. Okay, they think you are the black goat within the system. So when we all have that general optimism, it it hinders humans, the staff, from coming out clearly to tell you that there's something wrong with the system. Okay, so thinking potentially about very bad outcomes is quite unpleasant to people. You go all of a sudden and go and tell the manager that, listen, this company is going to collapse in the next 3 months. What do you think he will do when he's seeing money flowing and revenue is flowing through? Okay, you'll be seen as some terrible person. I have an instance back home in Ghana where there's this supermarket called A Life. I'm citing it clearly so that we can all make our research if we want to. A Life. So A Life supermarket came up well known, and then unfortunately they were over trading. Okay, you understand what over trading is. They don't have enough cash. They are owing a lot of supplies. They are selling things on discount, highly heavily discounted, and they have a lot of inventory piled up. Okay, now the chartered accountant, I think ACCA chartered accountant, then the financial controller warned the management that, listen, we are over trading. And then in those times, everybody knows that Life Supermarket was doing well. So for him to come out all of a sudden and tell the management that this is what is happening, they tagged him as a black sheep. Good enough to save his reputation, he resigned. And in a couple of months, the company collapsed. It collapsed, okay? So general optimism can actually be a threat to having a risk-conscious culture, okay? So let us not be, I'm not saying we shouldn't be positive. Let us not be too overly optimistic. Be positive, yes, but when you find something wrong, report it. Okay. Inertia deals with inactivity from the English word inactivity. Okay. So where we end up accepting everything as the status quo without seriously considering the outcomes, any alternative outcomes seriously. Okay. So take examples. Accountants, for example, we are only happy to present our spreadsheet, our financial statements, um, balance sheet has balanced, income statement, and then we leave it that the rest is for someone to interpret, someone to deal with it. Shareholders want to see their profit. The marketing guys want to see their budget. We think that's all. Let's leave it for them to interpret it. That's not it. Okay. When inertia exists, where we are only confined and happy with our environment without thinking of the effects of what we are doing on other guys, on other departments, then we are prone to fail. Okay, so there's no conscious effort to look at beyond. I prepared a financial statement, I'm done, I leave it. Can somebody really understand what you have stated as deferred tax? How does it affect the overall organization? Can you go the extra mile to just put some footnotes in the books just for somebody to know that, oh, contingent liability means this, okay, in a layman's language. Otherwise, what happens is that we all become autopilot. We are all on autopilot mode, and we become numb to the dynamic changing world of the business around us. That's the work of marketing. They should do it. But I've finished mine. I don't take the pay from the marketing department. I take pay from the HR because I work with the HR. They should deal with their staff. No, you don't do that. Okay, the whole organization, if one is like a whole human body, when the finger is sick, then you should know that the part of the body is sick. Okay, when one of the eyes starts blinking and you know the eye is suffering, you know that the entire body is sick. Okay, so it's a teamwork. Don't be confined to where you are. Okay, go outside. Go outside. And the more we become creatures of habit and correspondingly bureaucratic in outlook, the more our risk is likely. All right, our risk thinking is likely to deteriorate and risk will rise. So don't be comfortable in your area. Think outside. Don't be inactive. Finally, short-termism. Usually, when we have put in place proactive risk management systems, we are looking at how can we solve this quickly. Students are failing. They always fail. Let's say their pass rate is not good. Let's say for financial accounting paper. The question is, how can we ensure that these students can pass in the next sitting? Very short-term approach. But for all you know, the students are failing the financial accounting paper, which is being taught in the year 3 or year 4 because they don't get a good foundation from college. They don't get a good foundation from year 1. Okay, so let us not look at a short-term approach. Which one can we correct quickly without any problem? That shouldn't be the output. The outlook should be at the long-term approach. Okay, so firms should always look at the bigger picture, strategically prioritize. Short-termism kills a lot because we want to see if our football team is not performing. Manchester is struggling. Today, Liverpool scores them 5 goals to nil. The next time, Man City comes to disgrace them at home. And we're all thinking of let's sack the coach because when we get a better coach like Klopp or name them like Conte, then they will fix the system. Forgive me for citing football, okay? No, but what about looking at the longer term picture, okay? It doesn't take just a few weeks or a few months to fix it. It should look at the bigger picture, okay? The long term, okay? The one that will not take the least effort, the least time, and the least investment, the one that will take long, okay? Where we can invest in the players and make sure they perform better, okay? So that the next time you see them competing on all levels and winning trophies all around. Okay, these are the main three traits I want us to look at. So there are some behaviors that can support a risk culture effectively. Management buying, the senior management, the executive, they should get behind and support this work. Okay, they should promote the risk culture across board. Let's get an ERM champion, enterprise risk management champion. It could be 1 or 2, 3, 4 people who would be trained to ensure that these guys will promote the value. They'll communicate this clearly to everyone. People will get excited about it. Okay. Again, let us integrate it as a core value within our organization. Train people, communicate clearly, and let people understand. Okay. Don't just define it as a principle of the organization where people could just recite it, but let us ensure we can enforce them. Okay, so that staff who uphold these values, we reward them. We incentivize them. Okay. Okay. Also, define desired behaviors. What are desired behaviors? Don't just again list these behaviors, thinking that people can interpret it. If you need to add more detail, add more detail. Don't leave room for any misinterpretation of these desired behaviors. And finally, we should be persistent. Okay. Though, of course, people may not buy into the risk culture, but let's persist. Over time, what will happen is that these new behaviors will replace the old behaviors. It's not easy to change old behaviors within a relatively short period of time. If you have a family member who is a heavy drinker or a heavy smoker, and you know this guy is towing towards the line of contracting cancer because he's destroying his lungs with alcohol or smoke, then for sure what you have to do is that this guy has developed the habit over time. How do you solve them? It takes a while. It takes a while, and continuously you have to persist. Okay, When a risk culture functions well, employees are always good at detecting risk. They will not hesitate to report any risk that they see quickly, and the information gets acted on management without any questioning. Okay. All right, that's it. Let's see risk appetite. Risk appetite, like an appetite, you long for something. Okay. Power in 2000 in its 2009 publication likened it to a thermostat. You know how a thermostat works? It will examine the environment. If the weather is cold, it will adjust. If the weather is hot, it will adjust. Okay. So they said that's how risk appetite should be for any organization. Organizations should look at all material risk and design controls for them. Okay, where we will produce a residual risk consistent with our risk appetite. Okay, so like a thermostat, we should adjust to the changes. When the risk is high, let's adjust. When the risk is low, let's adjust to ensure that we meet the given risk temperature. Okay. If risk deviates too much from what management should think, then we should promptly act and fix it. Okay. Now, first, there are two main benefits of a risk appetite. The first notable one is that it helps the organization to know how much risk they can take on. The second notable benefit is that they ask which risks are in fact good to take. So how much risk can I take? Which ones can't I take? But which risks are good for me to take, to tolerate, to accept? Okay. Now, why does risk appetite not work for most organizations? Research shows that it's not working. Okay. Because one, the term is vague. It's ambiguous. Okay. No one has been able to formulate a precise risk appetite statement. Okay. A correct one. Some firms now have thought that once they have defined some paragraphs, some pages of risk appetite, then it is once and for all, and it covers all risk. Sometimes they don't even update it, okay? But there is no standard, no regulated or widely accepted format of a risk statement, appetite statement. So now you see that this statement is based on the vague definition of what a risk appetite is, and um, most likely, most firms will pick the 2004 definition of what risk appetite by COSO. Okay, they have actually made it more vague. They see risk appetite to be the degree of risk on a broad-based level that a company or other entity is willing to accept in pursuit of its goals. Okay, quite vague. Some abstract, arbitrary terms used over there. So you see companies consulting or contracting consultants who draft and try to interpret this in their own way. So it's not working. Okay, it's not working. You cannot take the risk appetite statement of Tesco and think that it will work for Barclays Bank. Sometimes people think one risk appetite should be generic enough, so it becomes more abstract. In 2017, COSO updated the definition of risk appetite, and again, it gave more confusion because it lacks precision. Here, they said risk appetite is a strategic, financial, and operating parameter, qualitative or quantitative, expressed in terms of a target, range, flaws, or ceiling, and agreed on after management discussions and review of past performance. It's vague. What does this mean? It's vague. It's just putting together some terminology, some key big words, and then populating it together. It doesn't make concrete sense, okay? As it sounds, risk appetite can be anything. It can be qualitative, it can be quantitative. It can even be a hybrid of the two, okay? As long as we can identify risk to that definition. So talk of examples of business risk appetite. Some people will give you lengthy 10, 150-page document. Some have just one summary page and think that's all. Some have numbers, KPIs assigned to it and think that's all. You made this, then you've made the risk appetite. If not, then you've not. So it's not quite clear. Okay. Again, why does it not work? Of Nielsen and Jenkins Guard 2018 mentioned something important. They said it is when firms attempt to write formal risk appetite that it can become not just a distraction but a curse. Don't make it formal. Okay, try to make room for some informal terminologies, informal acceptance. Okay, so a risk appetite is a kind of a statement policy that's supposed to cover the willingness of the firm to take risk and guide his decision making. Make it practical. Involve everyone. Don't just include the mainstream guys. Include everyone. Okay, if some crazy guy wants to bomb your hospital, this wants to detonate something or to burn your office, it will start from the front line, from the security. When they are able to know that the security guy gets up around this time, goes for lunch, and spends 15 minutes or some, and there's a little gap, that's where they will infiltrate. Okay, but don't make it quite formal. Formality is good, but try to include all hands on board. If there's the need for any informality, just bring it in. Okay. There's also a danger where we make it so hard to impose such policy documents because it becomes more bureaucratic and overgoverned. People don't understand it, so you have to just abide by it. It happens in most organizations. Ironically, the danger is that they disconnect the assessment of risk from an active consideration of an upside potential. Okay. There's another more deeper criticism against risk appetite. They said, in a sense, the firm is not even supposed to have one. You are running a business with the aim of making profits, okay? With the aim of maximizing value for your shareholders. Why do you think of risk? That is the situation where people think that risk is always negative. So when you bring in the element of risk and the CEO, the shareholders don't understand, already they think that you are working to bring the company down. So they always hold directors to the fiduciary duty where they have to maximize the shareholders' value. But of course, that is where they have to clearly communicate that, listen, there is always a risk and return trade-off, opportunity cost. And until we meet that, we cannot meet the goal of maximizing the long-term value of the firm. One more item which has made risk appetites quite troublesome is because the enterprise risk frameworks that we use in recent times are arbitrary aspirations. They are not practical. You cannot draw down on them and apply it in real life. It's just something we write. Vague concepts just picked together and infused, and it creates more confusion because at the end of the day, we want to impose these arbitrary targets on stakeholders or on employees to meet. It doesn't help. Okay. How do we improve this? Let us be very explicit, very clear. If we have to quantify, we need to quantify things to the extent which is as much as possible, to the minutest detail. Try to quantify things, okay? Don't hide things in vague terms. Don't just write big words and leave them hanging. No. Again, it turns out our firms cannot really have we cannot have a fixed absolute risk appetite with the aim of thinking we can use it to maximize firm goal. No. Remember, there is always an upside and downside of the company, the positives and the negatives. So like the game, it is a game. We have to always trade off risk and return. Okay, the higher the risk, the higher the return. We must always plug this in so that stakeholders will understand. Again, absolute limits may be relevant in certain specialized cases. Absolute, okay? Especially in organizations whose main aim is to preserve value. Talk of the pension funds, the life insurance. These organizations make room for zero appetite for risk. They don't make room to tolerate any risk because the slightest mistake, you cause somebody's life, someone can die. Okay, so for them, their policies are so strict, no room for failure. And again, absolute limits on risk taking prove harder to sustain. However, firms whose objective is value maximization, they can also consider this. Okay, they can take this. In value maximizing firms, risk appetite for risk will be relative, not absolute. Okay, so we always try to quantify them in percentage terms using some percentage metrics. Okay, finally, like I said, quite a number of risk assurance techniques. I just kept it as an appendix because, like I said, there are a lot and we cannot cover everything. So we just highlight them as a closing remark for this particular topic. So fraud detection and prevention techniques, internal control processes, external audit, internal audit functions, SWOT and personnel analysis, use of risk registers, and risk taxonomy, okay, where we try to plug in some structured checklists which will normally categorize enterprise risk in according to their features. Sometimes we put them into subdivisions, sub-segments, okay, when the features are the same, okay. Here, what the risk taxonomy does is that it helps us to weigh risk against opportunity and to see which areas we can manage, which ones are outside our scope, okay, and it also helps us to know our risk exposure and how we can report this in our risk reporting frameworks. Then there is the gap analysis. Gap analysis simply helps us to draw out the main risk to an activity or project. And normally we call upon a departmental head to answer some questions and tell us what gap do we have outstanding. It happens mostly in project management, okay? We have causal analysis. What caused this risk? If we're able to identify the root cause, we can fix it, okay? Again, we have Pareto's 80-20 principle. Okay, you've heard it, Pareto's analysis. So here it also helps management to focus efforts on those risks which has the potential to cause the greatest harm to the organization. Normally, Pareto's principle tells us that 20% of the organization's risk which we've identified will actually contribute to about 80% of the overall impact or exposure. Okay, so that's it. It has various dimensions. Pareto's principle, 80-20 principle, has various dimensions. Then we have the capital asset pricing model. You might have remembered this risk-free and then risk premium elements, okay, which helps us to see the trade-off or the relationship between expected rate of return and then the risk elements, okay. And then cyber risk analysis, we looked at it in our cyber risk management. Probability, simulation analysis, sensitivity analysis, scenario analysis, Delphi's techniques, Monte Carlo, cross-impact analysis, a lot of them, okay? There's a lot of them. All right, so that will be it for this session. And hopefully, I believe we might have all gained something beneficial from this. Okay, friends, good to see all of you all to get this through, and then I'll see you soon. Bye bye for now.